Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, I'm Pip Mackay and welcome to NLP for Business, where we look at the mindset and communication tools for business success and personal well-being. And today's topic is how to anchor success with the circle of power. So this is really all about how you can get an instant change in your mindset in order to have confidence and self-esteem and to be enthusiastic and happy for, say, you're going into a business meeting or you want to negotiate a deal and you want to be in a really great state. So what we're going to cover today is how to instantly change your emotional state, how to access confidence whenever you need it, and I think that's a wonderful tool, how to increase energy when you're tired or discouraged, and finally, how to have the right mindset to succeed. And the way we do this in NLP is by a process that is called anchoring. So basically, anchoring is where you take one thing and you're able to associate it with another thing to get a particular emotional state. So as an example, can you remember a time when you were with your loved one and maybe you were dancing on the dance floor and this song came on and you were looking in each other's eyes and it became your song? And then you're there with the kids and you're stressed and you're on the way to work or whatever and you've got the radio on and that song comes on and all of a sudden you feel instantly happy, you feel transported back to that moment in time when you were feeling that love. So what we've got is a song which isn't necessarily related to that feeling of love, but because of the strong emotional state that was happening when that song was played, the two now have become associated. And basically the song has become anchored to that positive emotional state. Well, there's many ways that anchoring happens in real life. And in actual fact, there's been a long history of studying this. So in 1902, Edwin Twittmeyer actually did an experiment where he was looking at the knee-jerk response. So that's basically where you hit the knee and it jerks. And what he found was that he would hit the knee, obviously, and it would jerk, and that would be the knee-jerk response, and it's a way of testing reflexes. But what he found was that if he rang a bell just before he hit the knee, and the knee jerked, and then rang a bell and hit the knee, after a while the two became associated. Then, if he just rang the bell, the knee would jerk without the actual hitting of the knee. And the two had become associated. In fact, he found that even when he asked the person not to jerk their knee when he rang the bell, that it was completely involuntary. The moment the bell rang, the knee-jerk response was there. And this is a very interesting concept because how many times are we automatically responding to situations because of some arbitrary stimulus? I mean, it's quite amazing. In actual fact, this is the way a lot of advertising works. Like when you think of a brown liquid that's got some bubbles in it and it's full of sugar and it's put in a bottle, would you really want to drink it? But when it becomes associated with feel-good emotions and the real thing, and you call it Coca-Cola, now suddenly millions of people are drinking something that they wouldn't if there wasn't that association. So this is the way advertising works. But we can also use this process for our own emotional responses in a positive way. So Ivan Pavlov, as you've probably all heard of, he did a lot of experiments with the digestion that happened for dogs. And what he found was that if he hit a tuning fork or put on a metronome just before the dogs were being fed, then that sound became associated with the salivation process that the dogs were expecting food. So then even when the food wasn't there, and he put on the metronome or hit the tuning fork, the dogs would salivate even when there was no smell of food there at all, and the two had become connected. Then Skinner did the same thing with rats and had a whole experimentation with rats. And then the whole field of behavioural psychology came about, where people started to look more closely at the way human beings can be conditioned to have responses that are automatic in this way. Now, we want to be very careful with anchoring, because anchoring can happen all the time. And as business owners, if you've been very stressed and you are in a grumpy mood and you come through the front door and you're in a grumpy mood and your family sees you and you're in a grumpy mood, and if this happens over and over again, after a while, just you coming through the door becomes associated with you being in a grumpy mood and all the feelings they might have of being upset or being hurt because of your grumpy mood. And then after a while, your presence becomes associated with this negative emotion. And that can be one of the ways that we start to destroy relationships. So it's very important to understand that. The same with your kids. If you're frustrated when you're doing their homework and you feel a bit, annoyed because they're not getting something done quickly, they can start associating work, homework, learning with negative emotions, because that's the response they're getting. So it's very important to be aware that if you are grumpy, that you might want to change your emotional state before you walk into the home, because your grumpiness has usually got nothing to do with your family, and they shouldn't be the ones who bear the brunt of something that's happened at work. So it's really important to be able to change our emotional state when we come home, have a break from work, and have something that anchors us in a positive way when we come home, so that we're in a great emotional state for our kids, for our spouse, for other members of the family. This becomes a really important thing. Sometimes in relationships, it's important that if you have a not easy topic to talk about, that you don't do that in bed before you're going to go to sleep with your partner, because after a while the bed and the process of going to sleep can be anchored to talking about difficult or not fun issues. So you might want to do those sort of discussions outside of the bedroom and make sure your bed is associated with positive anchors of togetherness and intimacy and other things, rather than negative anchors. So this becomes really, really important in relationships. But today what we're looking at is how you can use anchoring in a positive way. So how can you create positive anchors for yourself, for your teams, for your family, that allows you to have an instant feeling of well-being, even if prior to that you weren't feeling in the most positive state. So let's look at that today. So how do anchors happen? So basically there's neural pathways in the brain. So there may be a whole neural cluster over here, which is a particular positive feeling. And then over here is a neural cluster of a song or a touch or a sound or a picture. And that's over here, and the two aren't associated. What actually happens in anchoring is that because the two are happening at the same time, there's a neural pathway that connects the two. And then when this picture is flashed up, this emotion happens automatically. Or when this song comes on, this emotion happens automatically. Or when this very specific touch, it might be a touch on the finger, like that, the positive feeling happens automatically because of the trigger, what we call the trigger. And it's actually a neural pathway that's created in the brain. And the original behaviourists called this classic conditioning. And you can do it for anything. It's actually part of the way that we learn. So, after a while, you don't have to look at the keyboard to know what to type, because it's been classically conditioned in you, and it's a pathway of learning. So that when you think of a word, your hands are automatically doing the typing without you having to consciously think about it, because it's an automatic response. So what are the different types of anchors? There's naturally occurring states. So these are things that happen just in nature. And you can actually use those to help kind of fill up a really positive anchor. So for instance, if like me, you live somewhere like Manly and you love to swim, one of the things that is a tremendous naturally occurring state for me is to see a wave coming up and just dive under the wave and then jump up, and that always fills me with so much energy. And I could then at that time, whilst I'm in the peak of that state, just touch my finger like that, just squeeze my little finger in a very specific way. And after a while, that state will be associated with squeezing my finger. Then, say I'm in a meeting and it's a little bit boring, but I don't want anyone to know that. I could just quietly just squeeze my finger and suddenly be back in a positive, more energized, awake state. How cool is that? Isn't that wonderful? Now, the second way that we can have a state is what we call a recalled experience. So if you think for a moment now, a time when you were really excited, a really specific time. For me, times like that is getting on a plane to go overseas somewhere. So I love traveling.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.